Thank you, Chair. The application is 26 Harewood Road in Colliers Wood. The application site is here. Just to give you a general overview of the area and what the proposal is for. So the proposal is conversion of the property into 3 flats. The properties in the area are generally 2-storey housing. The application site forms part of a pair of semi-detached properties. So as part of the proposal, there is a 1-storey rear extension and also a mansard roof extension. So if I just go through some of the site photos quickly, this is a view taken from the application site, first floor, and on the right-hand side is 24 Harewood Road. As you can see here, they have a 1-storey side-stroke rear extension. So this is a photograph from the front of the property. This is the application site here, as I said, part of a pair of semi-detached properties. This application site here, I will come on to this later, but in terms of the split of the rear garden will be split into 3 to provide private amenity space for each of the flats. So the top 2 floor flats will access the garden via this existing side passageway. So this is a photograph of the rear of the property showing the application site, 24 Harewood Road here and 28 on this side. Photograph again from the application site towards the rear garden, showing the long depth of the rear garden. Again, another one showing from the first floor level, showing the outbuilding in the rear garden, number 28. So in terms moving towards the plans, the application site is outlined here in red. As this plan shows, quite a long rear garden. So this is a proposed block plan. The blue areas are showing the proposed extensions. So there's a roof extension here and also a 1-storey side-stroke rear extension. As you'll see from this plan here, the 1-storey side-stroke rear extension is set off the boundary of the neighbour on this side and only projects a minimal distance beyond number 28. So moving to the floor plans, this is a roof plan just showing the split of the rear garden into 3. So the ground floor flat, which is the 3-bedroom flat, would have direct access to the rear garden here. And as I said before, the 2 upper floor flats, which are the 1-bedroom flats, would access the rear garden via this walkway along the side, and each would have their own rear garden, and cycle space will be provided within each garden. Moving to the floor plan, so this is the ground floor plan here. So as you will see, this is a 3-bedroom flat. The accommodation here is considered to be good standard of accommodation with reasonable levels of outlook and light. As part of the conversion of the property into flats, if this was considered to be a house originally, there is some debate whether or not the house is originally a house or flats, but as part of the conversion, you are required to get a 3-bedroom flat back in the conversion, which the proposal provides. Bin storage is provided at the front and the side of the property. Moving up to the first floor plan, this is a 1-bedroom flat. All the flats meet minimum room sizes and GIA standards. Moving up to the roof accommodation, this is the smaller flat, 1-bedroom flat here. So just turning to some of the extensions, as I said, there's a 1-storey rear extension. The extension is modest in size. It has a slightly unusual roof form, but nevertheless, obviously consider that the extension is in keeping with the property. At roof level, the proposal would provide a mansard roof extension, which projects approximately halfway down the rear wing. Officers consider this to be a good design for the type of property, whereby it respects the original 2-storey rear wing. Also, as part of the amendments to the scheme, the roof extension was lowered in height, so there was no increase in height at the ridge level, which is a previous criticism of a previous refusal on the site. And this is just some cross sections showing the proposal and also the rear garden. So in conclusion, officers are happy with the scheme. The proposal will retain a 3-bedroom flat on the site and also provide 2 additional units on the floors above, helping meet Merton's housing targets. The extensions are considerably in keeping with the existing property and surrounding area. In terms of highways, the decision would be subject to a legal agreement which would restrict the upper 4 flats from obtaining car parking permits. Therefore, the application is recommended for approval subject to conditions in section 06. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The speakers on this, we have one objector. The agent who would have spoken in favour isn't going to be able to make it. So we have one objector, and then we have our ward colleague, Councillor Atawar, who will speak on the application as well. But first, the objector, which is Paul Brent. Can you let me know if you're, I can't see anyone in the room, so I'm assuming you're on Zoom. Yes, there you are.
Yeah.
Paul, you will have 3 minutes, and an officer will remind you when you have a minute to go.
There should actually be two objectors on this point. The two of us made a representation to you to object to this this
Correct.
extension.
The one other has, I think, more recently told us they cannot now make it. So it's just you.
No, he's here.
I'm here.
Derek.
Yeah, I'm here. I never sent a message saying that at all.
Okay, there's been a miscommunication there. So we do have two objectors. You have 3 minutes each. But I'm going to take Paul first. So
Thank you.
Go ahead.
I'm representing several local residents, and we're objecting to proposal planning application number 26 on the following grounds. Point one, the first application was refused on the grounds that the the ground floor flat failed to meet the minimum standards of single bed. The only change to this plan has been an addition of a corridor to bedroom number one. A corridor is a means of access to a space and not a living area. This does not provide any additional living space and does not make the living area any less cramped. Point two, there are no other examples of this type of conversion in Harewood Road. The proposed division of the existing gardening into 3 small separate gardens would be out of character, and this could set an undesirable precedent. Point three, I believe the proposed ceiling height in the main living area, flat 2, falls below the minimum 2.3 metres standard set out in the nationally described standard space. Point four, the planning department refers to the national planning policy framework. It states it is especially important that developments make optimal use of the potential of each site. I do not believe the current plan provides this. I believe the optimal and most flexible use of the site would be 2 flats, 1 3-bedroom flat and 1 2-bedroom flat. This would allow both units to be used by families and would not limit one of the dwellings to a single occupant dwelling. It would provide better quality and more spacious accommodation. Furthermore, it removed the need to subdivide the gardens into 3 units and would not require a dormer over the outrigger and decreasing the ceiling heights. Point 5, I have written to the planning department on 2 occasions pointing out that the border between myself and number 26 is incorrectly drawn. I do not understand how the plans can be approved with this clear error. Point 6, the submitted drawings show the side axis being used to store refuse and recycling bins. Their intention is to stack the food waste bin and dry recycling on top of this using a shelving system. With a border drawn in the correct location, the remaining space will be significantly decreased. All the pedestrian traffic to the gardens, including the access to the bike storage, would have to go past this narrow point. The same shelving system is proposed in the front garden, which would be much higher than the current front wall and would not be in keeping with the street scene. Point 8, there are numerous inconsistencies and errors within the calculations for flat 3. I've highlighted some of these in the handouts that I sent to you, and they're in figures C, D and E. Point 9, the amended elevation drawing in flat 3 shows an inconsistency with the amended plan drawing. The plan drawing shows the dormer being longer and having a larger floor area than the elevation. This is another mistake, making it impossible to correctly calculate the floor area. Point 10, and my final point, if the development does not include a 3rd flat, a condition should be added to the planning permission to prevent the property from being sold or rented as a 2-person accommodation at any future date. I'd like to thank the committee for allowing me to make my representation.
Thank you very much for that, Paul. Derek Lomas is next, and you will have a similar 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. My name is Derek Lomas. I live with my wife and family at number 28, next door to the proposed development. I've had comments from a majority of people living in the road, and they all seem to agree that this development of 3 flats is based on pure greed to get maximum return for minimum size living. No other houses in Harewood Road have been developed to this extreme extent. If agreed, this development will set a precedent for out of character, overcrowded, multi-occupancy flats that have bare minimum space to live. A developer at number 34 Harewood is waiting for this case to be agreed so that he can add more rooms to his already badly built extensions. As the council knows, the development at 34 was refused for the same reasons we are requesting now. The plans are mathematically wrong incorrect boundaries, square metre measurements of rooms don't add up, gardens botched into 3 with insufficient access past refuse bins that block access. With special regard to the 3rd floor flat, if the plans are to be believed, the proposed development involves destroying my chimney. I had no request from the developer regarding this. No notice of the planning was ever posted in the road. At the minute, there is rubbish strewn all over the front garden, which has been left for weeks, which doesn't bode very well for considerate building. My last point is, I know the council does not deal, as I understand it, with sewage and planning, but an easily possible 9 people could be in this development, and that is a big burden to place on an already overladen system. Dynarod have been called 4 times in the last 12 months to the road to clear blockages. I asked the council to refuse permission for 3 flats. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. I have been advised, contrary to what I said earlier, that the agent has now joined the Zoom call. That is a Mr. Nigel Coleman. So Nigel, you will have up to 6 minutes, which is the 2 lots of 3 minutes the objectors have just taken. So Nigel, are you there on the Zoom?
Hi there. Apologies, it's not actually Nigel. My name's David. I'm the applicant rather than my architect, which is Nigel.
Okay, with the unfortunate namesake.
Yes.
David,
yes.
Go ahead.
So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak. So we've worked quite hard with the planning officers on this site over the last few months to try and mitigate some of the concerns they had with the original application. And what we've arrived at, in my view, is a conservative application to reinstate a property into its proper usage. It's been vacant for a little while, into 3 units to help Merton meet its targets, but also to ensure that what we're designing and building is conservative for the local neighbourhood and neighbours. In terms of massing and extensions, what we've put in place, as Stuart kindly pointed out, it is actually very conservative. The mansard roof extension is very similar to what can be put in place through permitted development. And the rear extension, as can be shown in the floor plans, is actually a very minimal extension to the rear elevation already in place. And we've also looked to meet all of the space standards as per the planning policy of Merton in design of the floor plans and the layouts. And therefore, I would hope, as the planning officers recommended, that the application is put through.
What about the wrong maths? That's correct. You didn't say much, did you really? Oh, hello. You get to go.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. We have finally Councillor Lakshmi Attawar, one of my colleagues in Colliers to speak on the application for up to 3 minutes. Lakshmi, go ahead.
Right. Thank you. I'm speaking tonight on behalf of the residents of Harewood Road against the planning application for developing 26 Harewood Road into 3 flats. One 3-bed, 2 1-bed flat, and 1 1-bed. The previous speakers who objected against it, I thought, spoke quite eloquently, setting out their reasons why they do not want this development. And it's not because they're against developments per se. I do believe the main objections the residents of Harewood Road have to this development is because of its size, bulk and massing and overdevelopment. If it was converted into 2 flats, 1 3-bed and 1 2-bed, it would be acceptable to residents, but squeezing a 3rd small flat with less than adequate bedroom is certainly not, which in my view, unreasonable. Looking closely at the plans, squeezing in a 3rd 1-bed flat is really not necessary. Surely Merton's strategy is to get good, decent quality housing for the residents that need it most, or is it? Having 2 family homes with good sized rooms would not only be more desirable to have in Merton when there is a need for family homes, as there is already a glut of 1-bed flats. As the residents have made clear, there are several inconsistencies within the plan. Most importantly, the provision for the waste bins seems totally inadequate. In Collier's Wood, storage of waste bins is very important, and it is at this point in its development we ensure we get everything right with every detail and nothing overlooked. We must ensure we are not stoking problems for the future. It is important that when making decisions that Morden ensures that the right sort of houses providing decent accommodation to residents is more important than fulfilling targets at any cost, because this defeats the objective of providing good quality housing for the residents of Morden. In closing, I ask you, when you make your deliberations, you consider the plans carefully and urge the developer to reconsider their design.
Thank you very much, Lakshmi. We now go back to Stuart, the officer. If there's anything specific in those 4 contributions that you wish to come back on.
Just a couple of points. In terms of overdevelopment, which has been raised, just to emphasise that all the units proposed meet minimum space standards. It's making optimal use of the site. In terms of splitting the garden into 3, that isn't a characteristic of that area. However, officers don't feel that would be harmful. And in this instance, it's quite unusual that each of the flats would have access to their own private garden, which is often quite difficult to achieve in house conversions. In terms of the inaccurate plans, officers have checked on those points raised by objectors. As set out in the mod sheet, we can sort of belt and braces check that. If members were to approve the application, we can ask the agent on the applicant to provide dimensions on the drawings just to double check that, but as far as officers can see, that those plans are correct. And in terms of drainage, the objector is quite right, that does fall outside planning.
Thank you. On the refuse, the report says that the proposal, as we can see it, complies with our strategy and policy on refuse. Obviously, if it is correct, the discussion about where the boundary is drawn and how narrow that is, if the boundary is drawn somewhat narrow, and then the developer would have to come back to us to approve their plans for at a later stage if we were to pass it. I'll move to questions from members of the committee on questions on the report. First, Councillor Crowe. Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Brent mentioned that he thought the ceilings were below the minimum standard of 2.3 metres. And Mr. Lomas was concerned that his chimney would somehow be affected by these plans. Could the officer please comment on those?
In terms of the internal head height, obviously if the proposal is conversion of the property into flats, the existing head heights as will be what they are. So that's usually for new builds in terms of minimum sort of head heights. So in terms of, so what was the second point that you raised? Oh, the chimney, sorry. Yeah, the removal of chimney wouldn't normally require planning permission in any event, and that would be covered under building control, so it would be separate from planning.
I want to clarify further on that. The removal of their own chimney is not under planning permission, but the removal of next door neighbour's chimney, surely building control wouldn't allow that without the next door neighbour agreeing it.
So if it's removal of the neighbour's chimney, then they will obviously have to get the approval from the neighbour to carry out those works, yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you. One more question, Councillor Henry. Joan.
I just want to find out, I mean, I noticed you on your diagram, you show the entrance will be at the side, but is that the alleyway? Are they sharing with next door neighbor that little small entrance going in? Because at the end of the day, I just want to find out if they're sharing with next door neighbor where the entrance for the new build going to be.
I think I can answer that. According to the plans, that alleyway running all the way up the side to the gardens at the back and entering into the flats at the side would be for the sole use of the occupants of the 3 properties on that, but not shared with a neighbour. So it'd just be for the occupants of the proposed flats on this site. Seeing no more, one further question, Councillor Latif, there's you.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Brent said that he believed that the elevations and the plan drawings were inconsistent and showed different areas and different measurements. And then were led on to say that that could affect the minimum areas for the standard. Is that correct?
If the plans are incorrect, which officers don't believe they are, then that could affect the internal room sizes. Yeah, that is correct. But as I said, we can sort of do a belt and braces if members are to recommend approval or allow approval. We could ask the architect to provide more detailed drawings in terms of annotations on those plans. If they are indeed wrong, then we'd have to look to see how that affects the overall standard of the accommodation.
Okay, comments on the debate on the officer's recommendation, which is to grant prohibition. Councillor Draper first, Nick.
Yeah, just a very brief one. The reality is that if the application includes the next door neighbour's chimney, then which is perfectly legal under the law, and the neighbour refuses to allow that chimney to be demolished, which I suspect he probably would, then they'd have to just produce another planning application anyway. We haven't got a reason for rejecting it on that basis. Thank you.
My understanding is that if we were to give this permission this evening, they could do everything in the plans except knock down the neighbour's chimney. If that is in fact in the plans, it seems a little bit unclear from the drawings, but that would be, as with the last issue we discussed, for planning officers and building control at a later date, if we were to pass it. It isn't really a material planning consideration for our decision this evening. I see any other comments? Councillor Southgate, Peter.
Thank you, Chair. I'm looking at the comparison on page 17 with the previously refused application, and in the sort of tick box way of going through and saying, well, has that been addressed? It does seem to me that reasons 2, 3, 4 are dealt with. It's just this, the first one about minimum standards for a space for a single bedroom flat. And so I perhaps should have queried this before, but a suggestion that the space has been reconfigured to include part of a corridor to meet the minimum standard. I mean, if that were the case, I'd not be happy that had. I'm
sure an officer will interrupt me if I'm wrong in this, but my understanding is that the calculations on the total floor space inside the building and corridors linking 2 rooms are part of that. And so if the total floor space hits the standard, I don't think it's relevant whether it's part of a living area, part of a kitchen, or a corridor linking 2 rooms. I think we just look at the number of the total amount of floor space, which might be a flaw in planning law, but we work under planning law. I'm seeing no other councillors wanting to comment, so I'm going to move to the vote.
Sorry, last minute one. I do empathise with the concerns raised by the objectors and by Councillor Attois, who I clearly speaks with the best interests of the residents in mind. I'm just not convinced of what the planning reason would be to turn this down. I'm not particularly enthusiastic about it. It does seem, to be turning a family home into a more crowded site. I'm just not sure that it's overcrowding, or I'm not sure that it could be put in a planning terms for why to reject it. So conflicted, do empathise. I'm just not sure what we could put forward for rejection. Thanks.
Thank you. I think I'm going to repeat a comment I think I made at the last meeting, or possibly the meeting before, that we as a committee don't have the ability to amend planning applications. It may be we all think it would be better if this was 2 larger family homes instead of 3 smaller homes. We cannot amend the application to make it that. We can either pass it or refuse it on the application as it stands. And as Billy says, I haven't heard yet from any councillor proposing we refuse. And if we were to want to refuse, we'd have to come up with those planning grounds that don't seem obvious at the moment, but we will see. I'm going to now move it to the vote. The officer recommendation is grant planning permission subject to conditions. Can I see those in favour? 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 in favour, my non-vote and the Liberal Democrat absent makes the 10. So that one is passed. Agreed. Next one in the order I gave is agenda item number 6, 16 to 20 Morden Road in Abbey Ward, the erection of a 5-storey building to provide both residential and commercial. I thought this one was Stuart. Are you back in this hot seat?
It's the other Tim online.
It's the other Tim online. Okay, as we heard from earlier, Tim Lipscomb is presenting the report on this one, agenda item 6. Go ahead, Tim.
Good evening, members. Thank you, Chair. If you bear with me, I will just share my screen to include the presentation. Hopefully now you should be able to see my screen. I'm afraid it's not appearing in quite the way. Ah, okay.
It does show that you are sharing your screen. There we are. Got it. Go
Excellent. Okay. Taking you through the plans. Sorry, bear with me. It should be doing this in full screen mode, but I seem to have lost the ability to do that, but I will take you through as it stands. Here you can see the site, the existing former Barclays Bank building. In terms of the surrounding area, you've got the High Path estate here, which is due to be redeveloped with taller buildings in the near future. South Wimbledon Tube Station is on the corner here. Spur House, a tall residential building adjacent to the site. To the immediate rear are much smaller 2-storey terrace housing, and the buildings to the back here are outshots of the residential elements of Spur House. Here there is another flatted block to the south of the development site. Here you can see the existing building, and this is Spur House, the taller building to the side. It was offices on the 1st and 2nd floor, and at Barclays Bank below. There is now a prior approval application for a change of use of the building to residential. Here you can see the existing site layout. So the site is accessed via the side road here, which then leads onto a parking area at the back. And you'll note that there's a large tree here, but that would be unaffected by the proposals. Moving up, you see there's a recess to the back of the building. And I'll show you how that appears on the elevations. Oh, well, it's a slightly lower set down part of the building. We'll see it on the photos. Moving on to the proposed development, you can see the ground floor layout here. And now the proposal is set out at page 36 of the agenda. So the proposal is to erect a Part 5, Part 6-storey building with basement to provide 25 flats with 3 commercial units at ground floor level. So you can see here the 3 commercial units at the frontage, and then smaller residential units behind, an area of communal space here, 3 parking spaces, which would all be reserved for blue badge holders. 2 of those would be to serve the residential use and 1 to serve the commercial uses on site. A store for refuse and a store for air source heat pumps, with the bike store having been moved internally. So when the application first came in, we had the bike store to the frontage, which didn't assist in creating an active frontage here. And so that's been revised and an additional commercial unit proposed. If I take you through the plans individually, here you can see the ground floor plan in a bit more detail. So there's an entrance from the rear from the parking area and entrance out to the communal space here. Each of the ground floor units also has its own entrance to the rear. Now, I'd just like to take you through these drawings, as I'm afraid they weren't included on the plans in the agenda. They are on the website and have formed part of the application. The 1st to 4th floor would follow the same layout, and that is the same layout as in the previous application, which I'll come on to the significance of that shortly. Here you can see the top floor, again, that hasn't changed since the previous application, a set down element at the rear with an area of communal amenity space and other green roofs. Now, if I take you back to the main presentation, this is actually a view from the rear and then a view from the side. And if I take you down and show you the view from the frontage and how it integrates into the street scene. Bear with me. Okay, here we go. So you can see the height of the building in relation to the adjacent spur house. Here is a section drawing which shows the step down bit, which would be an area of external amenity space for all residents. As I say, the application is a revision of a refused application, and in the report you can see the key comments of the inspector are highlighted at paragraph 4.14. Bear with me, I'll come on to that. So this is the front elevation with protruding elements and window surrounds and street parking, street planting to the frontage there. In terms of massing in relation to the surrounding buildings, you can see in red the proposed building and proposed 3D visuals. Now, apologies, these aren't appearing larger on your screen. So you can see the shape of the building with the step down section below and the amenity space above and also to the rear here. The only thing to note on this drawing is that this actually shows the arrangement with a bike store at the front, but the bulk and massing of the building otherwise is very similar. Well, the bulk and massing is exactly the same. It's just the detailing of this front area. So moving on to the previous refusal. As I say, the key comments of the inspectorate highlighted in paragraph 4.14. Some important parts to note from that in terms of the inspector's conclusions are: the proposed building's exterior style would combine modern architectural personality with a harmonious rhythm of fenestration and materials. Furthermore, it would provide a more gradual step down between the building heights of the taller spur house to the lower Falcon house than the existing situation. This would moderate the blank expanse of the southern gable end of spur house, that's a neighbouring property, building, and provide a visually smoother transition between the mass of these blocks. So it's clear from that the inspector accepted the bulk massing and general design of the building. However, the issue that was raised is that the proposed landscaped frontage area, and then you can see that here because previously these were to serve dual aspect dwellings at ground floor level with an opening directly onto the main road. So the proposed landscape frontage area would appear inadequate in proportion to the highway corridor, the proposed block, and more traditional landscape setbacks between the highway and housing and Morden Road. This aspect of the residential proposal would be discordant with the character of the area. So a clear objection to the ground floor residential units and how that would appear in the street scene. A associated concern from the ground floor units related to the living standards in terms of dominance of traffic, frontage design, landscape and ventilation and cooling of single aspect units. The inspector found the degree of single aspect units was acceptable, but a cooling and ventilation assessment would be needed to demonstrate that they would avoid overheating without reliance on mechanical cooling systems. And you'll see that the full wording of the decision is included in the modification sheet. So if I take you through the plan, you'll see that the front elevation is very similar. The difference is being that this scheme tried to provide some defensible space at the frontage, and it had a very low overhang above it, whereas now it's pushed up a little bit more and there's space for signage, and it doesn't include these areas which are seeking to provide some degree of defensive space. It provides a continuous glazed frontage. In terms of the previous scheme, it's of note that the bulk, massing, materials and general design of the proposed building remain as per the previous application. The ground floor layout has altered, and the current scheme does not involve residential units at ground floor fronting onto Morden Road, but instead would provide glazed shopfront commercial units to this frontage. As a result, the previously proposed ground floor family-sized dual aspect residential units have been omitted from the scheme, and smaller single aspect units have been proposed in their place. But this really as a result of the refusal based on the residential units fronting the road. So this would indicate that the applicant has responded to those concerns. The proposal is now reduced from 26 units to 25 because of these additional commercial elements. The layout of the upper floors and the rear amenity parking area remains as per the previous application, so the changes are limited to the ground floor only. Given that the ground floor residential units have been removed from the scheme, that the inspector supported the use of winter balconies as a means of providing amenity space, in addition to communal amenity space, officers conclude that the application has overcome the concerns raised in regard to the standard of accommodation. In addition, removing the objectionable ground floor residential units that fronted onto Morden Road has allowed the design of that area of the frontage to be altered to be more suitable to the setting of the busy road, rather than residential frontages leading directly onto the pavement almost. As with the previous scheme, whilst there would be a change to outlook and some marginal impact on light to neighbouring properties, the proposal is not considered to result in material harm to neighbouring amenity. And it's of note that that wasn't a reason for refusal previously, and it wasn't an area that the inspector raised concern on. In terms of affordable housing, you'll note on the mod sheet that we now have received comments from the council's external viability assessors, and that no financial contribution is viable. There are some areas of disagreement in terms of the figures that go in. However, even on the best case scenario, the council's external viability consultants still conclude that no affordable housing contribution could be viable. And that was the same as with the previous application, unfortunately. As with the previous scheme, no objection is raised on other grounds, such as transport grounds, climate change, air quality, drainage, or basement considerations, and that is subject to potential mitigations secured through the Section 106 process. So members will note that some additional information in relation to air quality and climate change is recommended to be secured by way of 106 agreement, to ensure that any mitigation necessary, whether that be actual physical mitigation on site or by way of a financial contribution, is captured by the application. Critically, members should consider whether the revised proposal has overcome the concerns of the inspector in the previous appeal. The bulk and massing of the proposed building and the general design and form remain as per the previous scheme. The changes to the ground floor are considered to have overcome the issues raised. In addition, the applicant has now provided details of cooling and ventilation. The conclusion is set out at page 73, and the recommendation is for approval subject to conditions and legal agreement as set out at page 74. So that would be to include restricting parking permits, a car club membership for all eligible adults, a potential carbon offset, a potential air quality neutral financial contribution, and early and late stage review of affordable housing financial contributions. In terms of air quality, the previous decision was made following the publication of the new London plan. So the previous decision was made under the same policy landscape that we're considering this current application under. The inspector didn't raise any concern in regards to air quality or require details to indicate that the development would be air quality neutral. So it's now a requirement of the new London plan that all development demonstrate that it's air quality neutral. However, there are exceptions to that. in the cases where schemes are not resulting in additional motor vehicle parking, that do not lead to an increase in motor vehicle movements, and do not include new combustion plants such as gas-fired boilers, they are assumed to be air quality neutral. However, 10% of the yearly heat demand from this scheme would be by gas-fired boilers. Therefore, we are including a requirement for an air quality neutral assessment as part of the Section 106 dealings, which will identify whether mitigation is required. The impact on air quality is an improvement over the previous scheme because it removes the ground floor receptors, residential receptors, which was the key concern. Any further mitigation required, as I say, can be secured by way of condition and legal agreement. In terms of climate change, you'll note that there is a sustainability statement submitted with the application. Yes, sorry.
Can I ask you to wind up a little bit?
Okay, sorry about
rather long
that. I'm just getting very to the end. The sustainability statement is submitted with the final details to be sought by legal agreement. Therefore, the recommendation is as set out in the agenda. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Sorry to burst in just as you were finishing.
No, not at all.
Right, we have 3 speakers on this, an objector against, obviously, the agent in favour, and then a statement to be read from one of the local councillors. Our objector is Sarah Sharp, who's not in the room, I'm assuming on Zoom. Yes, I can see you there. Go ahead, Sarah, you have 3 minutes. Someone will remind you when there's a minute to go.
Okay, thank you. 2 years ago, you refused an almost identical application for 26 flats on this intensely busy A219 and A238 roads. The design review panel gave it red. The applicant took it to appeal and lost. It's back tonight with 25 flats with more single aspect dwellings than before, with the same plans in the design and access statement for floors 1 to 6. The defensible hedge has gone, the old defunct energy statement submitted verbatim. There is no BREEAM rating at all, and no separation between residential and commercial waste and services. And again, it offers no affordable housing. We need high quality housing, especially affordable, to last and be fit for purpose for the next 5 decades. And the reasons for rejecting the previous application, policies CS14, DMD2, and the NPPF remain valid tonight because the changes in this new application are limited to the ground floor. The rest of the development is identical to the previous application. Add to that the planning inspector's appeal decision, which is a material consideration, and the new London Plan policies D6 on design, housing and energy. And this application doesn't comply with them. The officer says 2 residential units fronting the development on the ground floor are now replaced with 3 commercial units, and this removes the planning officer's concerns. But it doesn't, because the inspector ruled in points 11 to 15 that the developments as a whole, including floors 1 to 6, couldn't achieve suitable living conditions in spite of the winter balconies. The limited building setback in proximity to the intense traffic highway, even with soft landscaping, hedging and compact trees, couldn't achieve comfortable living conditions for all future residents of the development. That included those entering and exiting the block, not just for the ground floor occupants. So even if it's commercial units now, the resident entrance remains at the front. The development doesn't comply with the London Plan D6 on high quality housing, attractive design, or on avoiding single aspect dwellings. Single aspect dwellings have increased to 11 from 9. Yes, they're not north facing, but the London Plan says all single aspects must demonstrate light passive ventilation, passive, not mechanical, and how they avoid overheating without relying on mechanical cooling systems in all habitable rooms and kitchen. And that has not been done. I don't oppose a modern build on this site, but surely we can do much better than this intimidating, unwelcoming mass of dark grey brick cladding and dark grey powder-coated windows and doors with no clear contextual design narrative. Where's the joy? Where's the greening? Where's the retrofitting like Wellington House instead of demolition? This application opposes more policies than the refused application, and I urge you to reject it, especially as it sits on a harsh and relentless grey traffic thoroughfare. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. The agent now gets the equivalent time, so 3 minutes, and that is an Edward Ledwidge. I can't see in the room, so I'm assuming he's on Zoom as well. make yourself known. Do you know if we have him? It doesn't look like it. If it's a technical glitch in his lost connection and we'll come back, then we will let him back when we've had the statement from the local ward councillor, Councillor Nigel Benbow, which should be read by Officer Amy.
Thank you, Chair. I welcome the idea of new residential development at the disused Barclays Bank site on Morden Road. However, I will not hesitate to say from the start of the statement that the proposed planning application is still presented as a poorly designed and poor quality building that I do not wish to see in my ward, Abbey, South Wimbledon. From tonight's packed documentation, you will have read the design review panelists didn't like the pre-planning application back in 2020 and was rejected. I understand today's proposals have been amended, the PAC's rejection in 2020, but why now no affordable housing or commuted sum offered, but has the planner's recommendation for approval? Why isn't it against the council's policy of 40% of affordable housing? And were any public consultations taken place? No, of course not. Just another residential block ruining the landscape of South Wimbledon. No creative thoughts were given to the building fitting into our local community, but it has an adverse effect on the character of South Wimbledon. The revised proposed residential block would be 5 stories high, containing 25 residential units and 2 commercial units. Therefore, very little has been changed compared to the previous application heard in 2020. It was rejected due to the reason of their architectural form and facing materials would result in a development that fails to relate positively and appropriately to local character, to the detriment of the visual amenities of the area, and failing to deliver a housing development of the highest quality in relation to its context. The building appearance is still very unappealing, finished in light grey and dark grey facing brickwork with projecting window frames in dark grey coated aluminium. It is not high quality architecture, but it is of poor quality design. The proposed development would have a dominant and detrimental effect on the occupiers of Falcon House in terms of overlooking and loss to light to windows, many of which serve habitable rooms. The development would have windows facing Falcon House. Residents living in Spur House, right-hand side of the proposed development, are deeply concerned about the potential loss of light affecting their homes. Due to noise pollution from road traffic, residents have faced considerable issues. For the well-being of future residents, special attention must be given to these factors. This building will impact the skyline in our community with another high-rise block of flats and is becoming a common feature in South Wimbledon. The appearance and architecture cannot be described as high quality and is unambitious, dated, and does not derive from any good local context. Very little is mentioned about the surrounding landscaping. Considering the amount of air quality produced in South Wimbledon, there are still no signs of reducing traffic-related emissions. Astonishingly, the local police have had no contact with the developers before this application. They have strongly recommended the developers contact the Designing Out Crime Office to discuss secure by design. It is susceptible to antisocial behaviour at the rear of the development. Comments from the police stated the need for controlled access doors. The communal residential entrance lobby should be airlocked by a second set of access controlled doors, cycle storage, defensible space around the windows, the need for the CCTV system and lighting. Having said the above, I strongly urge panellists to reject this lousy design that would not enhance the appearance of the building in our community and fail to meet the minimum requirements of 40% housing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Amy, for just about managing to get all of Councillor Benbow's statement in, rattle through it and get it in the 3 minutes. I'm assuming Mr. Ledridge, the agent, has not joined the meeting and isn't in the room. So that is it for comments from outside of the committee. I'll move to questions from our members, which is in order. Christy, Southgate, Henry, Butler.
Oh,
Billy.
Sorry, Chair, would you like me to come back on any comments from the public speaking?
Oh, sorry, I forgot that part. Yes. Is there anything specific you need to come back on? Yes.
I'll just run through it quickly. Yes, it is noticed the scheme got a red at, or noted the scheme got a red at DRP previously. That was not the current scheme that we're seeing before us. That was a significantly different and earlier version of the scheme. Members will note that the urban design officer has not raised significant concerns, and in fact, the comments he did made on this application have been taken into account by the applicant, and the frontage design altered to allow for signage above the commercial units. There are more single aspect units proposed in this current scheme, but that is as a direct result of the changes that effectively we asked for in order to remove the residential units at the frontage. So those units on the ground floor are no longer dual aspect with the front and the rear, they are single aspect. So that explains the difference in single aspect units. However, they are all east or west facing units. In terms of the lack of information on some of the climate change elements, yes, this is noted, and this is why we're looking to secure more details by way of condition and legal agreement. Critically, you'll see that the energy statement submitted by the applicant does demonstrate that they would be meeting the 35% reduction in CO2 levels on site. So it's the detail rather than the entire direction of the climate change information. In terms of separation between commercial and residential waste, members will note that the bin store is actually very large for this size of development, and it can more than easily be subdivided or managed in such a way that both are collected from the same spot. The comments of the inspector clearly relate to the concerns about the ground floor elements, not the floors above, and this is why quite often you won't see ground floor residential uses directly fronting onto a very busy area. But of course, to somehow extrapolate that relates to all floors of the building would not follow, and that's not what the inspector's decision indicates. In terms of mechanical ventilation, we can deal with this as a way of condition, but the applicant has provided more information in that regard. Moving on to the second speaker's comments, yes, there is a requirement for 40% affordable housing, 35% if it meets the Mayor's fast track standard. However, members will also be aware that that is subject to a viability assessment. If we've had clear indication that the scheme is not financially viable, we would not be on a very sound ground to refuse the application on that basis, and it could be deemed as unreasonable in the light of the evidence we have. In terms of loss of light, as I've explained, this was not a reason for refusal previously, and the bulk and massing remains the same. Secured by design comments are noted, and this is your note controlled by way of condition. So details like airlock doors can be included. And that is all of my observations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay, questions to the officers on the yes, and I had the four. Councillors Christie, Southgate, Henry and Butler in that order. So Billy.
Thank you, Chair. On the affordable housing, I don't understand how this site, which is directly opposite a tube station, short walk away from Wimbledon train station and on a route with main buses, I don't understand how a site we can propose to have a development built there and this scheme not be profitable enough to be considered viable to even make a contribution to affordable housing. You know, in 7.5.8 in the report, to me, unless I'm misunderstanding it, specifically states how valuable this site itself is, particularly under its current uses. So I don't understand why it wouldn't follow that the properties that are proposed to be built would be able to be sold or rented at a premium. I appreciate a viability assessment has come in and has told us that it's not viable, but can we have some more information as to why? What is the logic behind that? How can this site not be considered viable? What is the prohibitive factor here? Thank you.
Thank you. And as before, we'll take all four questions and then go back to the officer. So Councillor Southgate, Peter.
Yes, thank you, Chair. On the mod sheet, the third paragraph says there are areas of disagreement over build costs, but then it gives two identical figures. So can we have one of those corrected? Is our viability consultant's estimate lower?
Okay, thank you. Councillor Henry, Joan.
To understand benchmark land value, that's not necessarily what the applicant has paid, but a current valuation of what it might be worth in the market. Can we just have that confirmed?
Okay, we'll come to that. Councillor Henry, your question.
Thank you, Chair. I'll pass my question. I was going to ask about affordable houses, but Christy asked already.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Butler, Ben.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, some of my questions are already taken and very well asked. What I want to add here is just the officer's original presentation on this tonight, in concluding the reasons of refusal before and the justification for suggesting we grant this tonight. The reasoning seems to be only on the one point on the changes of the ground floor, which, spoiler for my comments later, is in my judgment not enough. But there still is in play here the other three reasons in the single aspect, the architectural character, the other two reasons, sorry. Can I just clarify on that point in terms of the main changes that the developers made that have changed the officer's recommendation to grant? Thank you.
Okay, so Tim, there's the question on the assessment on affordability. Some questions from Councillor Southgate on costs and the market value of the land, and Ben repeating some of this, but also asking about I believe, 3 reasons why we rejected last time. One of them has been dealt with. The other 2 seem to be still outstanding, or we could refuse with exactly the same 2 grounds, even with the inspector's judgment. So if you could cover those, please, Tim.
Thank you, Chair. In relation to affordable housing, if I could just share my screen and you'll be able to see some more details. Apologies, that was a typo. I do appear to have put that same figure in twice. You'll be able to see the correct figure when I show the screen. So obviously this is not, there's a lot of figures here, and I can't necessarily give you a summary of the matter within the few minutes that we have here. The information is available to view on the website and has been available to view leading up to the meeting. So you'll see that, though I take you through the email from the viability consultants. So the benchmark land value, there's a disagreement over that. The Altair, who are the viability consultants, believe that that should be lower than the applicant assumes. There is a difference in build cost as well, extrapolated out across the building. There's a slight disagreement on commercial yield, 6 to 5.5%. So all these different inputs will have a different output, obviously, at the end. It's fair to say that any viability consultant employed by a developer is looking to minimize any affordable housing contributions or provision, whereas the viability consultants employed by the council do not have that bias. Arguably, they're looking at this from a very black and white point of view. Other issues that we have on this are the finance rate, slightly different, 6.5% versus 6%. The appellant hasn't assumed ground rents, and therefore that's something that's been included as well. So all these factors coming together indicate quite a difference in position between our viability consultants and the applicants. So the applicant shows a scheme deficit of almost 3 million compared to our consultants showing a deficit of closer to 500,000. However, that would still mean, as I say, on this best case, worst case versus best case scenario, that it's still not viable. Now, I agree with the concerns which are highlighted. This is a site in a central area. They're putting a lot more built form onto it. In simple terms, how can it possibly not be viable to provide affordable housing? However, the policy is subject to a get-out clause, if you like, on the basis of financial viability. And that is exactly what has happened in this case, that the applicants have provided a detailed demonstration of the financial viability of the scheme. That has been reviewed by an independent third party, and they conclude that the scheme is not viable. So unless we have very specific evidence to the contrary, my advice would be that we'd be on very unsound ground to refuse when we have sought professional professional advice on this matter, and it's concluded that it wouldn't be viable. In terms of the other 2 reasons, what we do need to distinguish between is the reasons for refusal by the council and the reasons for refusal by the inspector. So the inspector's decision is a material planning consideration, and we can't simply overlook the comments that they've made. So the inspector did find that the level of single aspect units was acceptable, and he noted that there were elements of the design which made these good single aspect units, and he also noted that they were only east and west facing and therefore not north facing. The current scheme introduces more single aspect units, as I explained, at the ground floor. So there is a concern there, but seeing as the applicant has responded to concerns that we raised, it would not seem entirely reasonable to penalise on that point. Details of ventilation are to be secured and controlled by way of condition. And as I say, that would be officers consider that it has overcome those concerns. If there's anything further that I can elaborate on, please let me know and I will do so.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm seeing no more questions, so I'll go to comments on the debate, which is on the recommendation to grant permission. Councillor Butler first.
Thank you, Chair. And just to start with a conclusion, I suppose, this is a proposal to refuse. Because for me, even on the one thing that the officers have suggested that we grant this with, I don't think that is good enough. I think, frankly, there's a confusion between a developer responding to a refusal and wanting to change it to actually doing good enough changes. And I don't think that's happened here. And that's in addition to the architectural form and character, which I think is linked to the ground floor situation. I don't think there's enough space given in this changed application as there wasn't before. And this is especially when you look at the character and the amenity space on the streets when you're coming south to north to the junction. Those have been my main reasons to refuse this application. And a slight comment that's not related. I do not think the affordable housing viability is good enough on that. But I don't think, from what I've heard, we should put that in our refusal tonight. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'll go Alan Breaches and Draper in that order. Stephen.
Thank you. If we do reject this application by 10 p.m. from 7 p.m, contrary to officer recommendation, will have deferred or rejected 136 units of housing tonight, many of them in the Wimbledon area of the borough, and with some affordable there. Tim Lumscombe at one stage was asked by the chair to hurry along. That's fine, it's the chair's prerogative, but I found Tim Lipscombe detailed, comprehensive, addressed the previous application, the inspector's concerns being addressed. Tim Lipscombe has informed us that we're on very, very icy and thin foundations if we do reject. Viability has to be looked at, and it's for the government, the policymakers, to grab a hold of this viability aspect. If officers are saying the viability has been done, the independent viability experts of the local authority has seen this and has agreed this. Obviously, I would want as much affordable as possible, but the facts are there. I think we should go with this. It's more housing in a much needed borough. It's an infill borough. We don't have the numbers of units, 500, 600, where affordable fits in really, really nicely and really, really well. Where you're getting 20, 30 units, you will be struggling on the viability. But we have officer recommendations here, and we're ignoring them, and we have to put up with the consequences
after this month, after May, of picking the pieces up when we invariably lose on appeal. So I would urge my colleagues, all my colleagues here, to really think deep, long and hard about going against officer recommendations again.
Thank you. Councillor Draper, Nick.
Yeah, I've heard all of that, and I am going to vote for this, but colleagues, so far we've done 140 homes which we deferred or rejected or accepted, of which only eight have been affordable, and even then we were quarrelling over it. I mean, as far as I am concerned, either we get viability consultants who really want to work harder for people needing affordable housing, which is a large percentage of our population, or we admit that Morden, unlike its neighbours, just can't hack it. Because that's the kind of feeling that I'm getting tonight. I'm really, really, really disappointed. And of course, I'll vote for this. It's not a bad scheme. Thank you very much.
Councillor Crowe, Stephen.
I think the issue here is that we have seen two big applications and no affordable housing, or 8 affordable units. Now, on this particular application, the financial viability study suggests it's not feasible. And I kind of agree with Councillor Christie. It's hard to imagine why that is the case, given the location opposite South Wimbledon Tube Station. And I think there is something wrong here, but I can't quite put my finger on what it is. I feel that the viability applies to this particular application, but it doesn't necessarily apply to this site. If there was a different application for the same site, we might get some affordable housing. But if we approve the application in front of us, we'll never know. Alternatively, if we reject the application in front of us, something different might come along, which will meet, or at least go some way to give us some affordable housing. So I think we've got to kind of stick with our policies and say, we want applications that meet affordable housing. And if you can't come up with that, have another think. So on that basis, I would be in favour of rejecting. Thank you.
Thank you. I think this whole system of viability assessments is flawed and needs changing from national government. But I think it was instructive where it explained that developers will usually want to decrease the amount of affordable housing, anything, and that we as a council our experts are neutral. If the developers are going to be biased in favour of decreasing, then maybe our assessors should be biased the opposite direction to balance that out. And I think that might be a way we should go forward in the future. But that is aside from this particular application. Can I see any other comments on the application? Councillor Southgate, Peter.
I am, to say the least, unnerved by the wide discrepancies between the applicant's assessments on really all the numbers here and the mod sheet. You know, and our own assessors, more than £1 million, and the bottom line really is a deficit from the applicant's estimate of 3 million against ours of £500,000. So don't trust the figures, I'm afraid. Still, there is a problem with this ground floor, isn't there? That's pushed us into the position of having more single aspect units now. And I note the comments of the urban design officer. It would be better if the whole ground floor was non-residential, and then it goes on to detail the stair court could be moved and so on. And I don't, I mean, knowing the site well, really anything residential, even around the back at ground floor level, it's not an attractive prospect. And I think as I walk past the ludicrously named Madison Heights the other day. I remember that coming here for an additional flats on top and realizing just how bad it was actually. So I'm not happy about the clearly about the affordable aspect. I mean, I would at very least like more agreement between the two estimates to have confidence in them. And I do think the treatment of the ground floor, I appreciate what's been done there by introducing commercial units, but it does then cause other problems, the increase in the number of single aspect units. So I appreciate the developer is probably tearing his hair now and saying, is there any way of pleasing these people? But I'm not satisfied with it as it stands. I would support refusal.
Okay. I'll let you back in. Yes, Ben. Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Chair. Just to add quickly on this, because I just wanted, because this is a public meeting and there's been points made about the need for housing, and I completely agree with that. And this is in my ward, and don't I know that we need housing there? I want to still propose a refusal on the, in my opinion, lackluster changes that they've made in response to the refusal before. But also on the affordable housing, just as this may be one of my last council meetings, just to say what on earth does the character of an area mean? Because we are, as a council, saying that the regeneration of the High Path estate is sorely needed, which it is in my opinion, and that a vastly higher number of good social homes in this area is a good thing. And if we're saying that this isn't viable to put affordable housing in, and affordable social housing being an important distinction, I think to put zero affordable housing in there would be completely detrimental to the character of the area, in my opinion. Obviously, that might not be a judicial planning distinction that we're putting in the rules, but I just want it on the record that I think that's a consideration that needs to be made. But yeah, overall, I think we should refuse. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I'm going to take it to the vote on Councillor Butler's proposal to reject. And can I see all those in favour? And all those against? That is a 4-all tie. My casting vote is going to go against that rejection. So we take it to a vote on to grant permission. The offers a recommendation to grant permission. Can I see all those in favour? Sorry, I put my mic back on. The original vote of the 8 members not in the chair, it was a 4-4 tie. Therefore, the chair, I casted my casting vote against the proposal to reject. So now we move to a vote on the proposal to grant planning permission. And I'd like to see those in favour. And those against? Okay. I'm going to rerun the vote in case Councillor has made an error. All those in favour of granting permission? Four. That is the 5 members voting, and it's come out as 5-4. So we have agreed to grant permission to that development. Sorry for the confusion there. Okay. Now, we are now on to dealing with 2 more to go. Item 10 on the agenda, which is 41 to 47 Wimbledon Hill Road on the Hillside Ward, and Tim Bryson will present on that.
Thank you, Chair. Just share my screen. Members, this application site is on Wimbledon Hill Road in Wimbledon Town Centre. The site relates to the building known as the Bank Buildings. A number of you obviously will recognise it. The site has been before committee before, somewhat 2.5 to 3 years ago, under a previous application. The application itself is for a change of use to the building and to extend the building at the rear. It was a change of use from what's currently a mixed use at the building with retail at ground floor, with education above and also office, and it would change to a mixed use building to provide flexible Class E use at ground floor level with hotel above. So this is just the existing ground and first floor plan. So these, what is proposed at ground floor, there's currently the 4 small commercial units at ground floor. This would be altered to have 2 larger units, so they would be knocked through to create 2 larger units. This is proposed site plan. At the back, this is the proposed single-storey extension here. This extension here already exists, but it would be taken down and rebuilt as such. There's existing basements in the building which would be reused and would serve the 2 new retail units above. So at ground floor level, the hotel access proposed would be off Allowin Road here, where you'd come into a stair court and also a lift up to the upper floors. The 2 retail units at the front here and here. There's also a flexible use proposed at the rear, which could either be under hotel or office accommodation or other town centre uses under Class E, which would also incorporate the building at the back. Additional bin storage and cycle storage is also proposed here, and the site would be serviced via the existing service access alleyway at the rear of the building. Looking at the hotel use, so the proposed hotel use is a rather unconventional one. So it is proposed to be sort of what's called a part hotel, so apartment/hotel. So the idea is you have independent cooking facilities should you require it. So that is what's proposed as part of this hotel use before you. So it would be to the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd floor levels. As I said, access would be off Allowin Road. Other improvements to the building are proposed externally. So currently you'll see some site pictures that the shop units have been somewhat let down over the years with various advertisements and boarding put up. The proposal would actually reinstate smarter shop units here with new glazing, and also to the side on Allowin Road. This would be, the original elevation will be reopened up, doorway reused, and then this is the extension at the back, which would be taken down to footprint level and rebuilt up to create new active unit there. Just a view from the rear. No changes on this side of the building. So looking more closely at the building, it would be, some of the elevations would be addressed and made good. The windows would be repaired where they can and painted. Looking closer at the side. So looking at some pictures, members, so as you can see, various advertisements over the years have become onto this building. As I said, knocking the 4 units into 2 and also reopening up the original cornicings here, and also reintroducing new shop fronts would be enhancement to the building. As you can see, some of the windows have been somewhat tired, so the building is looking to get revamped as part of this application. Looking to the side Allowin Road, there's a sort of a section that comes out here which is going to be removed and original reinstated. So this would go, and this is at the back where this will be taken down and rebuilt with an active frontage as well. There's Google 3D view to try and show you at the back here various additions over the years, but essentially it's this aspect here would be taken down and rebuilt with additional bin storage built at the back here and cycle storage, and the access alley at the back would remain as is, which would service the building. And the applicants have put forward a 3D visual aid here for your consideration, just to show how they envisage the building as the end result. So overall, Chair, officers consider this to be a good use of the building in the town centre, which is in much need of investment and improvement, and recommend permission be granted. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. We have two speakers on this, an objector and the agent. The objector is Lynn, who has been watching the first 3 hours of our proceedings, I hope with interest, but now gets her own chance to speak. Welcome.
Thank you. I live in Orwin Road, a quiet residential street that is home to many families with young children. I and my neighbours have two main concerns with this application. Firstly, the location of the entrance. It is planned that this be relocated from Wimbledon Hill Road, the current entrance of the existing small-scale hotel, to Orwin Road, where it will be possible to access the premises 24 hours per day, 7 days a week. There is no CCTV in Orwin, and the nearest street lighting is a considerable distance away from the planned entrance. So as this will be in a dark location, it poses a safety issue for returning guests, particularly female guests. Additionally, my house is the top end of Orwin, the second house down on the opposite side, in fact. So I and my neighbours will be directly impacted by any noise or any antisocial behaviour relocating this entrance brings all day and all night, 7 days a week. Our second major concern is the lack of security. The rooms in this hotel will be more like Airbnb, a small flats, apartments. No man's security is planned at the ground floor level, a key issue identified by the police with the previous application and identified again by the police this time, who recommend an on-site concierge. Despite this, the application additionally states that security will be via a radio system, which appears to be remote from the premises. This presumably also means that CCTV viewing will be remote, both a worrying aspect in the event of any sort of emergency. With no on-site security, rooms can be easily used for multiple occupancy, for example, by away football fans visiting Plough Lane, or for criminal purposes such as drug dealing or prostitution, which is what happened in the parallel block of flats in Compton Road. I request, therefore, that the following specific conditions be included. Condition 1, the hotel entrance remain on Wimbledon Hill Road, where there is CCTV and plenty of street lighting. Condition 2, there be manned on-site security 24 hours per day to parallel access hours. Condition 3, there also be additional on-site staffing. Currently, no floor space whatsoever is allocated for staff 24 hours a day, so that in the event of a fire or an emergency, they are on hand to direct guests, particularly any who might be disabled, to a place of safety. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Mark Marizzi is the agent on this, and I'm assuming you're on Zoom. If he's with, oh, you're in the room. Sorry, here you are. Mark, go ahead. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. This application follows an original application that we had granted it on in September 2019, and it was a much larger scheme at that time of 76 units, very similar in its methodology to renovate the building, reinstate the windows, historical frontages at retail ground floor level to try and bring the building back to life. However, at the time, we looked at a much more adventurous scheme. We put a double basement in, we had a larger extensions to the back. It was a much more costly scheme. Obviously, just before COVID hit, it was a hotel scheme purely. And since then, as you know, hotels have really hit the market and haven't been viable. So what we've done is worked hard with other hotel operators that we're working with this particular developer and owner who's owned the building for a very long time, and actually had these tenants in as temporary tenants, hence why the building looks as it is at the moment. Looked at other suppliers. We're working with groups such as the Native Group, which we're looking at this one, which is a high quality boutique type hotel, but hotel apartments, which is seen very well through the viability of the area. Also, we listened to local residents at the time who wanted a viable place for Wimbledon to have their family members come on the weekend. So it ranges for different types of use that this building looks to do. All of the principles of that approved application, the access from L1 Road as the hotel entrance is being maintained, the active frontages along L1 Road, the reinstatement of the building internally has been stripped back, but we're looking to keep a lot of the material form internally, but take off some of the old elements and bring them back to life. So it's really much seen as a refurbishment of the building, and it's been long awaited by this particular owner of the building to try and come up with a viable way of looking at bringing it back to life and serving the local community. Thanks.
Thank you very much for that. Tim, Bryce, and anything specifically on those two contributions you'd wish to comment on?
Thank you, Chair. With regards to the Met Police's comments, Chair, so they have done a fairly detailed commentary on the scheme, but they have commented on the entrance to the hotel. But they do request certain minimum standards for the door, and also a CCTV system to be installed. But they have, Chair, recommended conditions which we have imposed on the application should permission be granted, and these are the sorts of conditions which were similar to the previous hotel scheme previously. So really, Chair, I just wanted to raise that issue. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move to questions. I'm going to have mine first. The objector raised two proposed conditions, three proposed conditions, one of which the entranceway, I think you just sort of dealt with. But the one about having security staff there 24 hours a day and on-site staffing 24 hours a day, is that something we could put in condition if we wanted to?
Chair, I think we have to look at the test of conditions, which is one of them. Is it reasonable and can it be enforced? I think what we have here is obviously a sort of alternative to a conventional hotel setup. But I would say that we can't condition that as it is to do with the operational sort of aspect of the building and its future occupiers. Clearly, the proposal would have to go through a form of building regs and building control aspects, but I don't believe we could realistically condition on-site security and on-site staff at all times.
Okay, thank you. Questions from other members? Councillor Lambrita, Stephen.
Yeah, could the officers just confirm the facade will not only be preserved, improved, but actually brought back in some instances with, especially where all those different style shop signs, shop fittings are, because I'm very interested in the facade. My understanding is, and I want it confirmed by officers, is that the developer is actually very keen to bring out the facade as it used to be, rather than hide it.
Yes, Councillor Beatus. So I put up here what's probably useful, the 3D visual aid really submitted with the scheme. So it really captures the enhancing these, drawing out the original, let's kind of call them cornicings potentially as a word for them, but looking at removing all those shop fronts that have been added over the years and coming forward with more modern shop fronts with lots of glazing and really enhancing the building. There are external improvements to the building as well, which also includes within the DNA statement removing the slate tiles and replacing them properly on there, and sort of full refurb throughout really. We have put safeguarding conditions on for further details of those aspects because the conservationist officer's comments has specifically mentioned this in the modification sheet. So we have safeguarding conditions for shop front design and also the windows and the roof tiles.
Okay, thank you. I can't see any more questions. I'll look for comments from members. Joan, was that a question?
Yes, this may be a very simple one. Can you say how many job vacancy with this new business create in the area, please?
Unfortunately, Councillor Henry, I don't have that to hand, unfortunately, the exact figure.
Okay, comments. I'll go with Councillor Southgate and then Alan Brutus. Peter.
Yes, no, I'm quite enthused by this actually, particularly because I've actually voted against the previous scheme, which was nonetheless granted approval, because I was concerned that the 5-storey rear extension could rather harm the profile, if you like, the setting of the. So I described magnificent bank buildings. So this will not in any way interfere with that, and that's attractive. And also the cleaned up frontage is a big improvement on the clutter we've got there now. And I require only one condition, that we have no estate agents. Thank you.
Councillor Alan Brutus. I won't take that as a serious suggestion, Councillor Southgate.
Yes, I too am enthused by this. I'm really pleased with it. And, you know, boutique hotel, yes, you appreciate a traditional lobby. We all recall watching Crossroads on Midlands TV, where I used to live at the time. But these things have moved on. Technology has moved on. I think the apartment style hotel is modern, is what people want. They don't want to be guided from a lobby with their bags taken upstairs by someone who opens the door for them. They want access themselves. So I think Wimbledon is crying out for hotel space, and I'm really enthused by the attention to detail to bring that corner back. And I don't know if we don't need to have the photo back, but that painting of a lovely bird, yeah, this is what happens when things like corner buildings like that are left, and the landlord is obviously struggling to fill it with permanency. So I think this will bring some permanency to it, and I, for one, am voting for this and would urge my colleagues to do likewise.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other comments, so I'm going to go to the vote, which will be on the recommendation of officers to grant planning permission, subject to conditions, etc. Can I see all those in favour? That's 8-4, mine not vote, the Liberal Democrat absent. So that makes up the 10 members of the committee, and that's in effect unanimous. Finally, item number 8. 225 Streatham Road, London. Stuart is to present on this one. It is unusual that it's before the committee and the recommendation is to refuse. It's Tim on screen. Okay. Tim, go ahead.
You're mute, Tim.
Hello.
Sorry, Tim,
sorry, it wasn't
hear you then.
intentionally on mute. I had unmuted.
We can
but
hear
I
you
think
now.
I think I had to be unmuted by the organizer. Okay, if I'd like, I share my screen now. Here you can see the position or the layout of the site as it exists currently. Sorry, bear with me. I was just getting my notes into position. So the description of the site and surroundings can be found at page 182. Please note at paragraph 2.2, there is a typo there which says the site is occupied by a row of shops that has since been demolished, with the current unauthorized use having been commenced on site. So this plan here is the previous layout of the site before the recent development. Now, the surrounding area is largely residential. The existing lawful use is a commercial use, with a car workshop having operated at some point on the site historically. I'll talk you through the proposed layout plan. There would be a car wash service, a tyre fitting service, and a car repair service and car sales over here. Cars would enter the site here and exit here for the car wash. And for all other services, that's tyre fitting and the repairs here, would come in via, and the car sales, sorry, would come in via the side road. And here you can see parking laid out on the site. You have some visuals of what the buildings look like, which are relatively accurate. There's no objection raised on that. This is a view from Stretton Road, with a rather large wall with a canopy behind it. This is the drawing of the actual workshop building. And then you can see the position of the buildings on site there. Sorry, this has all come on as one document, as opposed to it wasn't needed, that section. Here you can see some more visuals from the applicant, although as to how helpful they are, it is arguable. And again, some more visuals and plans showing the structure of this building here. Sorry, bear with me, my machine's just frozen. These are provided by the applicant. The intention has been to show the degradation of the site over the years, and therefore to support the idea of the regeneration of the site in this way. In terms of site photos, here you can see the canopy, which I referred to earlier, and the car wash operation going on underneath that. Sorry about the appearance of the presentation here. It's not as I intended. Here is cars entering from the side road. Here you can see the view from the main road of the side of the canopy. Within the site, looking towards the closest adjoining neighbour, and then the actual building itself for the car repair works. If I take you back to the agenda, it is of note, the applicant has made an additional comment just before the meeting, highlighting money spent on improving the appearance of the site and highlighting previous issues with antisocial behaviour that he's put a lot of money into to try and resolve, and highlighting a lack of support from the council and the police in resolving this. Members will see that the agent has contacted the council to request that the application be deferred to allow them to provide additional information. As you'll see, the reasons for refusal relate to inadequate information having been submitted, but that will be a matter for members to determine. In terms of the principle of development, at 7.2.2, the site has historically been in a commercial use and it is a scattered employment site. Therefore, the use as a car repair, tyre fitting and car wash would be acceptable in principle. We have looked very closely at the matter of site optimisation. There is a planning permission for a mixed-use scheme involving housing, flats above. It would be beneficial to the council's housing need if this scheme were to be delivered. However, as set out in the report at page 190, you'll see that this is not an allocated housing site. And for a number of reasons, we don't believe that we could reasonably resist this application and try to push for the housing application to be implemented. Both would be acceptable in principle, and it would be ultimately up to the applicant as to how to proceed. In terms of the visual impact, the buildings on site are utilitarian in nature, not particularly attractive. However, they have a limited mass, and it's considered that they would not have an adverse impact. There are concerns regarding the impact on neighbouring amenity. The car repair, tyre fitting and car wash have the potential to generate noise and disturbance. In the absence of supporting information relating to hours of use, likely noise level, noise mitigation measures, which could be acoustic curtains or acoustic fencing, Officers conclude that the applicant has failed to demonstrate that the impact would be acceptable. The council's transport planner set out there will be a severe impact at the exit for those vehicles leaving the site and those on Streatham Road waiting to get into the site. HGVs and large car transporters will be unable to turn into the site due to the restricted geometry of the Streatham Road with the bungalows junction, and that's the small road to the side. The increased use of the existing access onto the bungalows with a generation of additional conflicting traffic movements resulting from the proposed development will be prejudicial to road safety. And in addition, no cycle parking is provided. There's also no information to indicate whether the impact on air quality would be acceptable. Site drainage, there is information on, and that's being concluded to be acceptable and can be secured by condition. Moving on to the conclusion at page 196, the principle of development is considered to be acceptable, but the applicant has failed to demonstrate that the proposed development would be acceptable in terms of disturbance to neighbouring occupiers, impact on air quality, and the impact on the safety and congestion of road networks. Therefore, the recommendation at page 197 is for refusal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Right, we have two speakers on this. First, is Mr. Agar, the applicant, is in the room. You will have 3 minutes, and this will turn amber when there's 1 minute to go. Thank you. And your microphone is on.
Thank you, sir, for giving me time to explain my situation and work in the property. When I moved to the property has B8 and B2 license, and I spent more money to clean the property. I took 250 lorries, grape lorries in scrap rubbish from there. I cleaned mouse, rat, and asbestos. More than 20 drug dealers and homeless people were living in the property. I kicked them out. After that, gypsy people broke my locks and they moved into the property and they dumped rubbish again. And they took over all tools and material, building material. My neighbor gave me their van registration number, which I gave to the police, and I have in my record. We called police several times, but the police didn't help us. I kicked the gypsy with the help of my friends from the property. I have so many crime reference numbers from police. I parked my car in the front of doors. I put a very short alarm to make safe the property. They try again several times to come inside, but they can't. The very short alarm system came on the time, and my neighbor called the police. Police came again. Council closed my business without any writing notice. I tried to find some proof in the writing from council for my solicitor, but no one helped me. Only I found that the local councillor is against me. He was sending the enforcement team without writing notice. My question is that the Morden Council and councillor are working for the public or for their own benefit. Where were the council and councillor in the past 3 years when all Mitcham and Streatham people dumping their rubbish there? I have some photos for your record. If you want, I can show you. We put the planning permission for car wash before we start under the state law, but council closed my tire business and my car service business, which were separate than car wash. I received call from my agent that we submit the planning permission for car wash. The council happy with our plan. The council told us you can go and open the place. After 3 days, the enforcement officer came.
That's your time, I'm afraid. I'm going to have to ask you to wind up. Just finish that sentence if you would like.
Okay, So many people complain against my planning permission. They are not my neighbor. They are away 1, 2, 3 miles away from me. The law says if anybody complain within 20 meters acceptable, otherwise we are not accepted.
Okay, I'm going to have to stop you there. It's gone over the 3 minutes. We have a statement from the ward councillor, Councillor Kirby, to be, Councillor Kirby cannot make it this evening, another been affected by COVID, but Amy is going to read her statement.
The land that this business has applied retrospectively to operate on is of significant size. It has 2 approved applications for housing on it, providing 26 homes, one in 2017 and another in 2019, that the developer did not progress. The developer has left the site in a slum-like condition for several years, with enforcement chasing him over graffiti, fly tips and ugly hoarding. Travellers visited and dumped huge amounts of waste on the land behind the hoarding, all of this affecting the quality of the local residents' lives. So when building work started on the sites, residents were excited about the housing development, which they hoped would finally be built. However, housing was not being built. A metal structure was erected and residents contacted me to find out what was happening, as they had been told by site workers that it was going to be a car wash business. Enforcement stepped in to stop work to discover the landlord had leased the land to his car wash business. The business put in a retrospective application and then continued to work on the site without approval on Saturdays and Sundays, disturbing residents with the noise of hammering. Again, residents advised me that work was going to progress the car wash. Enforcement came again, however, it didn't stop them progressing the work, and then signs went up to say the business would soon be opening. At this point, understandably, residents were furious. The following day, they were operating and washing cars without planning permission. Their hoarding was scruffy and the shutter door, one of their exits, remained covered in graffiti, which they did not think necessary to remove. Enforcement issued a stop order and closed it down. Signs were removed. Since then, it hasn't been operating. There is a car wash 200 yards down the road and another one opposite Biggs Marsh, so another one is not required in this vicinity. If this application is approved, it would bring a continuing stream of cars onto a scruffy site, which inevitably will affect residents' amenity, both in terms of visual movement and noise. The behaviour of this business so far has been without any regard to local residents or the planning process. It goes without saying that given Merton's housing targets and the fact that there is an existing permission for housing on this site, that this car wash business is not the best use for this site. I hope the committee will refuse permission.
Okay, we'll give our thanks to Councillor Kirby, Linda, for that. Tim Lipton, is there anything in particular in those 2 contributions you'd like to come back on?
I'll be very brief, Chair. I just want to clarify that the current use is an unauthorised use, and the council's enforcement team have served a temporary stop notice. Obviously, that temporary stop notice is in writing. I have to say I don't follow all of the concerns raised by the applicant in that no written notice was given. When the enforcement team investigate a site, they wouldn't necessarily provide written notice, but the temporary stop notice itself is very much in writing. So I'm not sure exactly what the issues are there. They've recently been made aware of. So if the applicant wants to discuss that with me further, that's fine. But as I say, it's an unauthorised use and a temporary stop notice has been served. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Right, 2 members, do we have any questions or clarification? 2, I'll go in the order I saw the hands go up. So Southgate and then Crow. Peter.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Streatham Road, does that have a double yellow line or red route? In other words, could cars queue outside, or would they effectively be prevented from doing so because it would be illegal?
Thank you. And Councillor Crowe will take the 2 and then come back to Tim. Stephen.
I'm just wondering whether the appropriate response is to defer this application to a future meeting rather than to refuse it at this time.
We will come to that at the end of questions. So I was going to deal with that, but if I could go to Tim just on Councillor Southgate's specific point on queuing and parking around the site.
Thank you, Chair. There are double yellow lines outside the site. with a few parking bays mixed in. In fact, if I share my screen, I can show the arrangements. So you can see, I'm not sure you can see it yet. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, we can.
You can, great. So here's the double yellow lines, and that's around the vehicular access, and then otherwise there are parking bays. So the view from our highway officer or transport officer is that this would create congestion. So if there were cars occupying these bays, there may not be room for a line of cars to queue up separately from the main flow of traffic. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. So on Councillor Crow's point, now that questions are done, we move to the debate. We have had officers and the ward member, previous chair of this committee, recommending refusal. The applicants themselves asking for deferral, as Councillor Crow has suggested. So I think I'm safe in saying that we're not looking at approving tonight. We will either defer to get the further information that the officer's report says we need, or we refuse. So those are, I think, is what the debate is going to be on. So can I hear comments? We'll go Alan Bretus and then Southgate in that order. Stephen.
Yes, obviously, I've been talking about being respectful of officer recommendation. The officer recommendation is for refusal here, which I'm minded to go with. But if the applicant is seeking a deferral, and is it my understanding at the moment nothing is happening there, but the applicant is willing to sit down and discuss and talk, and explanation and intermediaries sitting down with the applicant about our yearning for housing there, rather than quite a clunky, heavy business use, then I wouldn't mind deferral, provided, of course, that nothing is illegal is currently happening there.
Thank you, Councillor Southgate.
Yes, I'm quite drawn to the idea of deferral. I must say, we are, I think, encouraged to look at meanwhile uses, and I do remember the application for housing on this site, which I think we all approved and we're enthusiastic about. It's a shame we can't link a meanwhile use to be time limited on to encourage that that approval to be built out. Looking at the specific reasons suggested for refusal, they are, to my mind, reasons that could be addressed actually by condition. So I would suggest defer rather than refusal.
Councillor Henry, Joan.
I'd like to agree with Councillor Alan Bretis, because I've been listening to the applicant. I think some more consideration would like to put in place for further understanding. So apparently, a bit more understanding for the applicant, please.
Okay, thank you. From a planning and the planning department point of view, deferral usually would mean next meeting or the meeting after some tweaks to the plan, which is fine if you believe a tweaked plan could be acceptable to this committee. If you think it really does need to go back to the drawing board and in effect pre-application stage again to talk about whether we should go back to housing or what kind of business use to be on that site, I think it's more detail than tweaking is my, well, that's a decision you have to make. The decision is between refusal and deferral, and that decision is based on if you think the plan just needs tweaking, defer. If you think it needs a more thoroughgoing review, then you've got to go back to pre-application and refuse. So I think Councillor Christie to comment.
Sorry, James, actually a question more than a comment. How long has this been going on for in terms of going back and forth?
Oh, I don't know when this application was first. We have at the previous, I think, 2017 and 19 housing applications passed. So this one, I don't think I've got, I mean, it would be on the council's website, but the date of when the submission
If
was
it
made.
helps, Chair, the application was valid early January this year.
Okay, so it was made relatively recently. Councillor Christie.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, it'd be helpful to understand actually just from the officer's perspective why it is being recommended for refusal as opposed to deferring or continuing to negotiate with the applicant, because obviously the officers have decided that it's worth recommending refusal. So I'm just a bit confused as to why, or just their perspective on why that is the case, rather than continuing to engage with the applicant.
Is that something you can comment on, Tim?
Yes, I mean, applications should be assessed as they stand. Quite often, if there is some tweaking to be done, in this case, the transport statement submitted with application simply didn't relate to this proposal. It was just simply a copy of the previous one relating to the residential scheme. And we have no information relating to the impact on noise. So it's not a matter that we have a transport statement and a noise impact statement and there's some clarifications over methodology or something similar. We simply have nothing to support it. So from that basis, the application has not demonstrated that its impacts are acceptable. However, the applicant has indicated they would like to address these matters further. Discussions with the agent have indicated that they could potentially consider a temporary permission. However, we've not received confirmation of that in writing. There is a current enforcement case open, and in order to resolve the breach on the land, an application is invited and then assessed. So, you know, we have gone back to the agent in February, highlighting the concerns that we have. And we don't have a revised transport statement or additional information on noise. Therefore, as the application stands, it wouldn't be acceptable in planning terms. However, if members feel that there is scope for additional discussions and negotiations to be had on this matter, then there is that option to defer. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. There being no more comments, I'm going to take this one to the vote, and I'm going to take the vote first on the recommendation by officers, which is to refuse planning permission. Can I see all those in favour of the officer's recommendation to refuse? I'm seeing one. Those against? 4, 5, 6. So we are not refusing this evening. The second proposal, the only two we have left, is to grant planning permission or defer. So I'll take a vote on the recommendation to defer to a future meeting. All those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Those against? 7, 1. 1 not voting makes 9, and the Liberal Democrat isn't here, makes 10. So I've said it every time, I'm sorry. So that one is deferred to a future
Chair, is
meeting.
it possible to put a timescale to the deferment? Otherwise, I'm conscious this could go on for another few months. And
not usually, but I would normally trust officers to put it back to us when they think it is ready. Looking at this particular scheme, I would suggest that's unlikely to be at the very next meeting, although the gap between meetings this time is 6 weeks. So it's possible, but I would think it probably unlikely. But that is up to officers to recommend and then come back to us when we come through to draft and full agenda for the next meeting. So 2 more items on the agenda. 11, planning appeal decisions, a report to note. Noted. Agenda item 12, enforcement summary, a report to note. Noted. As I just mentioned, our next meeting is 6 weeks tonight and is the final one of this council term. So myself and a few others, it will be their last meeting. Well, a planned last meeting. Some others might have an unplanned last meeting. We shall see a week after our meeting in 6 weeks. But thank you all for coming tonight, and we will see you again.